Yeah, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Hire Talents podcast, optimizing the hiring process for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. And today I have a really special guest with us. We'll get into that, Gerald Leonard, and he has a consultancy, Principles of Execution, and he wrote a really interesting book that I'm really looking forward to getting the precursor to here, Workplace Jazz, how to improvise. And it's, I think, all about treating your employees like artists is kind of the theme to that book. So how did you come to, I guess, start this consultancy and write a book about employees as artists?
Well, the way the consultancy started was an interesting story. And, I had done a lot of consulting in my career. I had just left a major law firm where I did a stint for about 4 years. Prior to that, done a lot of consulting, did my bachelor's and master's in music. But the interesting part of the story of how the consultancy started was I got fired.
Oh.
and it was basically the owner and I had worked together and had known each other, part of association for like 9 years. Wow. And he wanted me to build a robust portfolio management in the commercial space like he was doing in the government space. Okay. And if we know anything about commercial business, they're not going to give you millions of dollars like the government will to do a project. Mm-hmm. They're going to give you $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 and say, show me what you can do, and can you generate profit or impact the bottom line? Yeah. So it wasn't moving as quickly as he wanted, and so we were making great progress, but it just wasn't as fast as he wanted. But before he let me go, I had just sold an engagement at an engineering firm, and I was the only one that had the skills. Oh. Nice. So he had to turn around and hire me as a 1099
to execute that project.
Exactly. And that was the launching of me starting my consulting practice. I was scared as all get out because I'd always worked, a full-time job. And I realized over time that I had tons of network. I had networked a lot. I had built a great platform. And I took a blog, Principles of Execution, added a service page and made it my website. Wow. Sent out about 100 or so emails or messages on LinkedIn, and 2 people responded and say, I have work for you.
Wow. So now you got 3 projects.
I got 3 projects, and I actually, within a month, replaced my full-time salary, and it started growing from there.
Wow. Wow. Well, I think it's a pretty common entrepreneurial journey, right? You leave your corporate cushy, job or whatever it is, right? Your W-2 job, and you walk into the abyss, and you have no idea what's to come, and it's usually pretty scary, but with just a little bit of, effort and grit, good things happen, right?
Exactly. Now, I don't recommend anybody just quit their job and go do this, but at this point, my back was against the wall, and I had a family to take care of and a daughter in college, so it was I have to make this work.
Interesting piece. I'm a big Sandler sales guy. In the beginning of his book, How to Teach a Kid, or You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike, at a seminar, tells his whole story about how he'd kind of lost his cushy gig, and he wanted to maintain his lifestyle and his country club membership, and raise his family, and his back was up against the wall, right? And so he would go and park his car in a parking garage with with the parking ticket, with no money in his pocket, and then he would go and sell until he could afford to get his car out of the parking garage, right? It's amazing what you can do when you're in a kind of a back up against your wall type of situation.
Because,
right?
What is this? Necessity is the mother of invention. Yeah. And you when your back's against the wall and you got to make it work. And, you realize, that you actually have acres of diamonds in your own backyard, and you start mining your own skills and networks and things that you've built. And you really realize what you've actually built. And that became how I built my company. It was networking. It was building relationships. It was building trust. And it was partnering and those kinds of things. And, everyone I hire or work with, they have to, it has to fit that culture, or else I'm not just looking for a body. I'm looking for someone who's going to add value and that I can add value to. And when we do that, we can make something great happen.
So how does this lead us to workplace jazz and the artistic employee? I think you're starting to, touch on that a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Creativity.
It's so, like I said, I did my bachelor's and master's in music. I went to Central State University and then at Cincinnati Conservatory. I did classical studies, spent a year up in New York and did some study before as I was playing professionally, and worked with the guy at Juilliard through Mann School of Music.
Yeah, wow.
And actually did a small stint in the ministry as I was doing a lot of this.
Okay.
And I decided after having getting married and having a couple of kids and still playing music and doing a bunch of other different things, that I really wanted to go full time in music. But now I got kids, and I grew up with my dad always being there.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I'm not going to cheat my kids from that and go on the road and be a musician. So I decided, let me find another career and pick up the computer. I picked up a computer, and because of all the music training, picking up the computer was like picking up another instrument. And it was amazing how much the mathematical part or the logic part of my brain had been developed, which applies to what we do with computer programming, project management, and so on and so forth. So for about 20 years, I was doing both. I was playing gigs, I was recording, I was doing shows, I was doing benefits, doing a lot of different things musically, and I was also got into consulting, and I already had my master's in music and stuff, so I wasn't planning on going back and getting another master's in business. Yeah. So I went the certification route of like Microsoft certifications, Nobel project manager certifications. But then I started realizing as I became a consultant and worked with a really neat consulting firm out of Delaware, taught me a lot about consulting, and you go on the client site and the teams started reminding me of rehearsals.
Okay, how so? That's interesting analogy.
Yeah, because when you do a musical, let's say someone hires you to go and do a show, let's say a Bill Blass show, or you're playing a chamber orchestra, or you're doing a jazz show, and you don't know the other musicians. But everyone else is hired because they're an expert in their area. Yeah,
whatever instrument that they're playing.
Exactly. Yeah. But to do this show and make it work, you have to go, okay, I'm an expert in my area, but what's the idea of the show? What's the point of the show?
Yeah, the purpose, so then you have the mission.
Yeah, you got to focus on the mission. You have to check your ego at the door, because you may have parts where you're just playing simple, boom, 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 or playing, funky music or playing whatever the show requires. Yeah. It may require every skill you have, or it may require a tenth of what you have. Yeah. But it requires you to do the show. And what I found was that on business projects, a consulting group would come together, and you got a project manager, a scrum master, analyst, developer, so on and so forth, right? Depending on the type of project, whether it's a process project or software automation or cloud, whatever. Well, each one of them are bringing this unique skill that they've developed. And then someone has a charter that says, here's the mission of this project. Yeah. This is the benefit that the customer wants. Here's what they want. Here's the stakeholder. Here are the sponsors. This is the people in the audience. These are the end users. These are the guys who are in the front seat and on the back seat. Yeah. So now they have to come together and subject themselves to each other, humble themselves, let their ego go, and start working together for the betterment of the overall project.
Play their role as designated by the project's mission, ultimately, right? And
exactly, it's like you're playing the concerto, but you're playing your part in the concerto. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so what I started seeing was high performing music groups had a certain focus or a certain mindset, and pretty soon there was like a flow. Okay. And I also started noticing that high performing project teams there was this flow. We became friends. We really got to know each other. We would support each other. We knew who was actually soloing, because they were leading at that time, whether it was the developer or the tester or the project manager or the business analyst. Yeah. Everyone would support that person to get their job done and make them look good. And it would go back. So there was this ebb and flow, just like in music. When you go to a really good concert, you should come out transformed or feeling better or excited because there's been this flow. That happens.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I mean, you mentioned something about like checking your egos at the door. And I was actually just listening to Scaling Up business coach the other day, and he was talking about, I mean, it's okay to have opinions and ideas and to share those, but at a certain point in time, the leader is going to make a decision. And the question is, are you on board or not on board? You know,
Right.
because maybe your idea wasn't adopted necessarily in this process, but can you then subsequently say, okay, I said my piece, you know, hopefully it was heard in a
Right.
positive way, right?
Right.
But the you know, the captain made a decision that this is the direction we're going, and it's maybe away from the way you had, you know, wanted or thought you were wanting to lead the ship, right?
Right.
But can you check your ego at the door and the project, and then be bought in to play your role, right? Or are you going to be a dissident?
Exactly.
So interesting. So tell me more about this, you know, artistic aspect of it. I feel like, you know, I don't know, it just, to me, it's maybe a connotation of like free spirited, no structure, right?
Well, you know, the thing is that it's not so much about being free spirited or no structure, because the idea of an artist. So when I think of an artist, I think of someone, again, who's in a very high powered jazz band, or they are the first violinist, or they're sitting in the orchestra in different parts. Well, okay, so the mindset of an artist is they've spent 4 years, maybe 6 years, maybe even 7 years or longer at the college level studying this instrument. Most of them have invested in their instrument, and a professional classical double bass or some fancy, or you know, violin will cost you the price of almost a car.
Oh yeah, wow.
So some of these instruments are $15,000, $20,000 instruments that these musicians have purchased themselves, that they own. The orchestra didn't buy it for them. They're bringing that to the table.
Yeah, they're bringing their own tools.
Exactly. And a lot of them will still, even after they go to college and do all this, they will still have a teacher. They will still find
a coach.
They'll still find coaches to coach them. So when you think about the idea of an artist, it's someone who really takes to heart. They're going to make sure they have the right tools. They're going to make sure they have the right knowledge. They're going to be the expert at what they do. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
And if we want to get the most out of them, the conductor is not going to go and tell the first violinist how to play that passage. He's going to express what he wants that passage to happen, what he wants to happen
with the intent and the purpose, the bigger picture.
Artist, exactly. It's up to the artist to then use his skill to bring that out of the instrument to create that picture that the conductor is looking for.
And so I think that's pretty interesting, because, you know, I deal with a lot of business owners, and I think almost all of them say when they go to hire somebody, they want that person to be independent, right? To be self-directed, to not need a lot of babysitting or hand-holding, right? And so that's probably the key, right? You got to find that artist who is super talented with some direction, right? You can't, if you don't give them any direction, then obviously, well, who knows?
Well, you got to paint the big picture.
Exactly. Yeah, got to paint the big picture. That's where you get your mission, your vision, your core values, your strategy, maybe, and that, as you duly noted, can be even down to a project level, right? So you start talking about OKRs, or, you know, could be a subset of the bigger mission. It has its own little mission, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so you got to give them that clarity, but then from there, it's let them use their skill or their, you know,
their artistry.
Their artistry. Yeah.
Their artistry and mastery of the instrument to do their job. And because, you know, the musician has learned the discipline to play within the lines, to the point that if you need him to be creative outside the lines, he has enough control to know where to move the line, or how to play within the boundaries to add some artistic flair, but yet keep it to the spirit of the piece. And what I found is that what I meant in my book about art, that workers are like artists, is that today, you know, we're in a gig economy, right? I mean, you're seeing so many more commercials about Upwork. Well, what is Upwork? It's like the human network of resources. You can hire a project manager or developers from anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
right? And they're being evaluated like a dinner on Yelp, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
the other clients that they've had can leave a recommendation and
Yeah.
say, this guy did this, he's great, blah blah blah. So they're getting Amazon reviews, if you will.
It's very subjective, depending on the consumer of the work product and how well it was orchestrated or not orchestrated.
Correct. But they're still being evaluated, so they care about the opinion of the people they're serving. Mm-hmm. So they now are really thinking, okay, if I do this job, am I going to get 5 stars or 4 stars? What do I have to do to get 5 stars or 4 stars? Yeah. I've actually hired people off of Upwork to do things, and they ask me, what do I have to do for you to deliver a 4 or 5 star?
Yeah.
Because they want their work to represent them, because they know the more they are, really focused in on what the customer needs, delivering that. But that also means that they have to be really, really good, genuinely good at what they're selling.
Yep. Yeah. And executing and understanding the customer. And it's interesting, that reminds me of a book my father wrote. It was called he called it the exchange diagram. And he pounded this into my head as like a small child. He's like, look, nothing, the only thing that matters is the other person's perception.
Right.
Right. So as you're mentioning, right, you got to do kind of 2 things really, really well. One, you got to focus on the other person and their perception and understand it, because that's, hard enough as it is.
Yep.
We call that emotional intelligence ultimately. Yes. Right. And, I think it's a little, there's some natural emotional intelligence, but I also believe it can be a trained and learned thing as well.
Yes, that's true.
You practice it, right? So it doesn't come naturally to, extroverts like me necessarily, or I think the world revolves around me. I gotta practice on that, right? But yes, you got to understand it. And then you also have that artistry and the ability to deliver on that expectation, right? Or the need of the other person.
Right.
But the thing that always got me about this is, if you do those 2 things, then the reward will come naturally.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
The money,
the benefits and the rewards and the revenue and whatever else you're trying to build, that will come, because you're adding amazing value, and people are perceiving that value, and they will pay you for that value that you're delivering. Yeah.
And I just read an article about See's Candy and Berkshire Hathaway and your buddy there. What's his name?
Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett. Yeah, Warren Buffett. Right. And he invested in the See's Candy, and he always, I guess he uses this as an example of like the ultimate business, right? Because they deliver such a niche product and such specialty product that it's so high value to their customers and delivers such kind of pleasure or enjoyment to them, right? But it executes that model so well, right? There's these people that have their unique perception, like I think we've all had a box of chocolates, and we all go through and they're like, I don't like that one, but I love that one, right?
Exactly.
See's Candy's really good at like delivering having that unique treat that and such variety that everybody can love them, right?
Right. Exactly.
Which allows them to charge a premium for what they deliver, making it an extraordinarily profitable business.
Exactly. And that's exactly right, because when you're delivering consistently and you build the process and the model that can deliver that, you can then begin to charge those premium prices, because otherwise it's a commodity, right? It's just another can of generic whatever,
chocolate or something,
or whatever the case is. But it's the difference between just a regular cup of coffee and a Starbucks coffee. Why would you pay what you pay for a Starbucks coffee? It's
3x
money. It's the brand. It's the value that they're delivering outside of that. And again, with the artist mindset of workers today, they're beginning to deliver that brand. And that's really to me, that's really the essence behind the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
And with everything that happened, because you think about it, the the last few years have been the perfect storm. You have
Yeah.
political uprising and all the kind of things that are happening, the racial stuff that's happened. Then you got a
Yeah.
pandemic on top of that,
Yeah.
and jobs and blah, blah, blah. And pretty soon it's just like everybody's like, enough is enough is enough. And they're going, they're looking around and they're seeing people, die and other things that are happening that's kind of morbid. But then they go, wait a minute. So they start looking in the mirror going, what does my life mean?
Yeah. What am I doing? And that's it.
Everybody
had a long time to sit back and reflect on what matters to them most.
Yes.
And, flexibility and the ability to do something that's rewarding and fulfilling, or to get out of a bad situation and go seek out something that's more fulfilling, more enjoyable, more, in a lot of cases, providing that flexibility and that work-life balance.
And it changes your mindset when you have survived a very difficult thing.
Yeah.
And you look back and go, I went through this, I lost my job, I did this, I did that for 2 years, 3 years, whatever. I survived, I'm stronger, I'm smarter, I'm better. Okay, I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, there's not much change except there's been an internal shift.
It's a YOLO, only one life to live, right?
Exactly.
I agree. I mean, I'm sitting here in my spare bedroom so that I can be at home, and hopefully the dog's not barking too much. You can hear him, but like here with my wife and my dog and my baby, and we closed our offices during COVID, and we're not going back, right? And I think it becomes part of our employer value proposition. It's also something that we added to our core values. Is this kind of like work-life balance that, we take work seriously and we want to do a great job and we want to invest ourselves in our work. But you know what? There's more to life, and how do we, as a company and as a team, help support each other in that? And being remote is one of those ways that we can do that, I think.
Yeah. But I think too that the pandemic and a lot of things that we've gone through the last few years humanized work.
Yeah.
Because everyone was forced to,
change how they worked.
Change how you work, deal with the reality. And I remember hiring my PR firm, and I'm sitting down with the young lady we're talking, and she's pitching me on it, and she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I have my child with me." And I'm like, "That's not a problem. Let's
no big deal.
No big deal.
What's their name? Let me see them."
Exactly, because it's like we were all, everyone is like in this real situation where we're fighting for our lives, trying to figure things out, trying to move forward, and work and real life got blended.
Yeah.
Got mixed up. Got meshed. Yeah. And people realize that, this is not too bad.
Yeah.
So you mean I don't have to just play this professional role?
Yep, but all the time. I can be myself.
I can be myself and be authentically myself and still be professional and still be the parent and still be the dad or still be whatever. And the bosses and leaders of organizations, entrepreneurs, they begin to understand. And for one, they had no choice because we're all thrown in this, this mixing bowl, and we all got to make it work. And what was interesting is the companies that had a strategy, were flexible, were human, that modeled excellence, that coached, they were the ones that, along with their workers, figured out together how to make this work. Those that were in the command and control
pivoted and made more money and grew, and
the ones that were in command and control, they are pretty much not in business because they lost people, they lost business, they weren't flexible, they couldn't adjust quickly. But it was the collective of, okay, let's tap into everybody's wisdom to figure out how to make this work. And again, that's a part of treating your employees like an artist. Because the conductor comes in and goes, okay, I have a baton. I got this Beethoven symphony. You all have the parts. I've kind of told you what my vision is or explained it, and I'm going to conduct you when they come in.
You got to trust them, right?
I got to trust them, and I got to trust that when I do the downbeat to the basses or to the timpani or to the violas or violinists, they're going to come in with their parts, and it's going to be in tune, and it's going to be in the spirit of Beethoven.
And their performance will be judged by the people consuming it or the outcome, not so much the journey, the road, or the every little detail or step that went into it, right? And
Exactly.
that's how you avoid the micromanaging effect.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Because you're not going to have a conductor who's going to micromanage that orchestra. They are expecting their people to know their parts and to know their instruments and bring their best A game to work. And so by having that standard and expecting that, then you can do the same even at a work level.
And that's where practice and meetings and, having structured meetings and good practices and coaching in the workplace can help keep people aligned and focused and to, figure out where those lines are if there's any ambiguity, but ultimately still allow them to do what they do best.
Exactly. And one of the things there's a number of things I talk about in the book, but one of the things I do in the book is for each of the models or skills of the improvised framework, because that's really what the word improvise is the framework. And let's take positive, one of the attributes is having a positive attitude. I mean, you think about why is that so critical in business? Yeah. Well, you think about a musical performance. Can you imagine the musicians get together to play this beautiful concerto or this sonnet or this great jazz piece of waltz or whatever, and they're all mad at each other? Yeah. I mean, what's that going to sound like? And it's like, okay, I got to play my part, but I don't like this guy.
The emotion comes through in the music, right?
Exactly.
Just like it does in work, right? How you write the email, how you talk to your coworker, how you deal with the customer. Oh my gosh. I mean, I had one of the craziest experiences this weekend. I think it might tell the story quite well. We show up to this restaurant. I won't name the name. And for brunch. And we got a 1-year-old, as I mentioned earlier. Yeah. So going out to eat is precarious at best, right? You try to get in there, you do your work, you get the food, you maybe have a margarita, and you get out as quick as you possibly can, right? Right. And we show up, and the very first thing the server does is comes up and just basically tells us that this is going to be a disaster, that everything's on fire, that this, she's having the worst day ever. And please bear with her. Like, well, okay. Well, thanks for informing us. But as the consumers, we're like, well, I feel sorry for you, but I'm here to consume. It's
not about you, right?
Yeah, it's not about you. I'm sorry about your rough day, but I'm hoping that you will be able to pull it together for us and get us some breakfast in a relatively timely manner.
Yeah, and give us a decent meal.
Yeah, give us a decent meal and get the order hopefully mostly right. Hour and a half later, we never saw our food.
Wow.
Never saw our food.
But think about what that performance, right? Now, it's like, okay, do I go back to that restaurant? That's always going to be there in the back of your mind. Yeah. Right.
And probably a great restaurant. I mean, it theoretically was a great restaurant. Right?
Yes.
Busy, packed,
Right. But it was a negative attitude, and they down-regulated with all the negativity or whatever, instead of up-regulating and having a positive attitude and really enjoying the process, and even
embracing the challenge.
Right. Well, even having a safe, but that says a lot about the culture, because even to have a safe place to say, wait a minute, I'm having a really bad time here, a really bad day. I need to talk to some coworkers. I need to talk to my boss. I need to just kind of voice this out, work it out, to either step back for a little bit and do something else instead of serving the customer. Yeah. So I can work through my emotions
in a positive,
exactly.
way, productive way, right? Yeah,
exactly. Because at the end of the day, people remember how you make them feel. Yeah, and that's true not just in relationships. That's true when you go to the restaurant. Yeah, that's true when you go clothes shopping. That's true when you buy shoes from Zappos. Yeah, you remember the experience of how you felt. Mm-hmm. And how you were treated. And here's why that's so important. And I talk about this also in my book. For each one of the principles, I talk a lot about neuroscience. I did a certification. I love studying. I love reading. I'm always taking classes, and I have coaches. And I did this program called Conversational Intelligence from the author of the book, Conversational Intelligence. Her name was Judith Glazer. Okay. She passed away a couple of years ago from cancer. and the world lost a beautiful person that
Yeah.
really was smart and a genius in what she was doing. But what I learned from her was that within 0.7 seconds, we feel whether the person we're getting ready to communicate with, we can trust them.
Yeah, it's like the energy, there is this,
Exactly.
and it's
Because
driven from that emotion, right? Like if the emotions are consuming you in negative emotions, but positive emotions, right? We see somebody who's very happy and confident, right? People naturally want to gravitate towards that person and sort of, like, I want some of that positive energy.
Exactly. And the reason why is because from a neurological standpoint, emotions are nothing but neurological chemicals.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when
Brain
we have a
chemicals.
great conversation,
Yeah.
and you've heard of the words of serotonin,
Yeah.
dopamine,
Yeah.
oxytocin, all those GABA, all those positive neurochemicals that make you
Yeah.
feel good and happy.
Yeah.
Well, that's what your brain starts emitting.
Yeah.
Even so our conversations are more than just verbal, they're chemical.
Yeah. 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 Through the emotions that are triggered through the energy of the other people we're around, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as a leader, I can come up with exercises or activities that even in a virtual environment,
Yeah.
that can change the chemicals that my employees' brains are emitting.
Yeah.
So that they're emitting those positive chemicals. Now, at the same time, I can do things, manage in a way that gets everyone to emit cortisol and adrenaline.
Yeah. So fear and defensiveness and
Right. And the amygdala kicks in, and now we're going, okay, fight or flight. I don't feel comfortable here. I'm concerned. I'm scared. Then we start jockeying. Then we start criticizing, and that's called down regulating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that literally starts with management, leadership, and again, treating your people as artists.
Yeah. The very first interaction of the day or in general. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's pretty interesting. I also think a lot about the concept of like you affecting the world or the world affecting you a little bit here. And I think that it's this like personal responsibility. And I think that's a big difference between kind of those A players and then maybe the not so A players, right?
Yeah. Jack Canfield has a formula that he teaches in his book, Success Principles, called E plus R equals O. And E is the event.
Yeah.
R is your response to that event, and O equals the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we can have a negative event.
Yeah. Everything's a disaster at the restaurant today.
But we can respond positively.
Yep.
And have the outcome turn out okay.
Yep. Yeah.
We can even have a positive event and respond negatively.
Yep.
And turn it into a negative outcome.
And take it. I think about, interesting thing about like taking the negative event and then having a, productive, positive response to it, and then having a positive outcome. Some of the best customer service or customer experiences come from a place that starts bad, but then the other team, party, or person you're dealing with takes responsibility and then does something to help resolve that, acknowledges without, putting blame back on the customer or whatever. Right.
Exactly.
And then, because I think we're all human, we all understand that, things don't always go right. Right.
Exactly.
And we actually appreciate even more, like you overlook it when everything just goes perfectly. You might even like forget to acknowledge that how wonderful that experience is when something doesn't go quite right, but yet it's dealt with in such a positive, productive way and creates a positive outcome, right?
Yes.
Because of that, then we remember that experience, and that experience is like way higher rated than the one that's just was perfect, frankly.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Because it's kind of like the perfect story, right? It's like this. We love the movies where it starts off and it seems like everything is going, and all of a sudden everything just falls apart.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the movie, the guy's like, or the guy or the girl is spending their time becoming the hero and transforming. And takes this negative situation, like they can't walk or they can't do this or they can't do that, and they turn it into this positive thing. you know, at the end of the movie, you're sitting there crying and you're like, oh
Yeah,
my
yeah,
goodness, this is
yeah,
so good. This is such a great
yeah,
story, because it hits us at our core as human beings,
yeah,
that
yeah,
we all know that life is not fair, and
yeah,
life is not always going to give us what we think we deserve.
yeah,
And sometimes life, you know, we just get hit over and over, but it's not how many times you fall, it's how many times you get up.
yeah,
And again, we take that to the employee situation. It's not, am I people messing up? It's, are we using those as teaching moments?
yeah,
Do they realize that they have the opportunity to take risks? And am I giving them the boundaries and the guardrails?
hmm,
Again, am I treating them like artists? Am I respecting them? Am I there to serve them? Am I there to be the model, coach them, and care for them through the process? So that, because then once people know that, hey, I got someone who's going to try to lead the way and model,
yeah,
they're going to coach me and ask me questions and let me think through things and come up with ideas, and they accept my ideas. They actually care for me as a person.
hmm,
Where do you go to work after, to some other, why would you want to
yeah,
leave that place?
yeah, exactly. So, and that's what we call like the three C's of the employer value proposition: culture, right? You know, and
Yes,
so what kind of culture are you creating? And you know, since we spend a lot of time at work, is this an environment? Culture is the environment that you're in, right? And that's
yes,
created through the values and way we operate, right? And is it one that makes you feel good, or is it one that makes you feel bad? And ultimately, you know, the three C's: compensation, career growth, and culture are all hopefully driving us towards an improved quality of life. And if, you know, if the culture is making us feel bad, that's diminishing our quality of life, and subsequently, yeah, our experience there, and driving us. And a big part of what you mentioned earlier, part of the Great Resignation, is that those
exactly,
things aren't
exactly.
being addressed, right?
Yes, yeah, and that ties into what my first book, which was called "Culture is the Base."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they talk about it a lot. It's a tricky subject, and it's and to, you know, make culture real is what, to talk about it is one thing, but to make it real is a whole nother ball game, right?
Yeah, yeah. Again, I kind of refer to culture as the base from the standpoint of any great song has a great bass line.
Mm.
And as soon as that bass line comes on, you know exactly the artist, you know the song, you know
Yeah.
the style of music it is, and
Mm.
so on. And to me, a company's culture is like that bass line.
Yeah.
As soon
Yeah.
as you experience that
Yep.
culture, you know exactly who you're dealing with, the
Yeah.
kind of service they're going to provide, whether you're going to like it or not, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so culture, you know, is king in so many ways.
Yeah.
You know, Peter Drucker says culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
I think both are pretty equal, but if you can't really deliver on the strategy if you have a bad culture.
Yeah. 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 That's why we like working interviews. It's a great way for people to experience the culture before they take the job, and vice
Yeah,
versa for, you know, the team to figure out whether this
that's
person.
that's 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 perfect. I know when I hire team members, I always have a 90-day plan in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that person has to demonstrate that within that 90-day period, they're going to add value, they're going to be a learner, they're a cultural fit.
Yeah.
And if that's not a match, then we shake hands and I go, this doesn't work.
Yeah. Move on. Move on. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And so because that way you give them, you know, to me, 90 days, 3 months is enough time for you to prove yourself,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's enough time for someone to come in, learn the organization, identify quick wins, even if they don't have control of a budget or
Yeah.
any big thing. If they come to work and or come to projects and they're coming with ideas and they are giving and they're collaborative and they're talking about things they're learning, then I know I have someone that is really going to be a game changer, and
Yeah.
that's going to be a great culture fit.
Yeah.
But they
And
may come in and do the minimum.
getting some those first wins, right? You know, they may not be the home
Exactly.
runs, but you know, they're initial
Quick
wins. And
wins.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just quick wins. And that paves the way to, okay, you know how to come in and produce results even on a small scale. Now, if I give you more rope and more time, I know that you're going to produce those results on a much larger scale.
Yeah.
And if there's a knowledge gap that can be trained, but it's very difficult to train on a culture gap.
Yeah. And we have a cool tool, a talent grader tool that looks at culture fit and effectiveness.
Yes.
Fit, and the coach the scaling up coach, this comes from Scaling Up, is modeled after their best practice. And he's saying, when you have a new employee or even any employee, you meet with them, they have a one-on-one with somebody, maybe not the CEO, but maybe depending on the size of the organization, but a leader. And really every week when you have those one-on-ones, you're looking at that, right? And you're plotting them in this quadrant, because it's a chart. So they're either up here, like perfect culture and effectiveness match, and that's a 99%, or you're way down here, which would be not good. But more often what happens is somebody's maybe a culture fit and they're not in the as effective as they could be, and also problem is when they're very effective but not a culture match, then that also is a big challenge. But having and just constantly talking about it in terms of those terms and looking at evaluating performance and having that conversation on a regular basis, and it's even so important in those first 90 days, right?
Exactly. And honestly, I would prefer to have someone who's a culture fit that may not have all the skills.
Yeah.
But if they are open to growing and learning and they're a culture fit, then I can get them there.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. I can teach the mechanics. I can get them there. Soft skills, hard skills. You can give them a plan of action and help them to grow into it. It's hard if you have someone who's an expert at what they do, but they're not a culture fit.
Yeah. We call them talented terrors.
Exactly.
And they're difficult, right? I mean, I think we've all worked with them, and a lot of times they can stick around in organizations for far too long, right? Because they're effective, like they're a great salesperson, a great program. I see them with technical people and with salespeople like the most. Those are like the two biggest culprits of that, right?
Yep.
They're really, really effective at what they do, but man, they almost always eventually there's always a climax there that is not the good feel good end story. It's usually the car goes off the cliff and nobody survives.
Yeah, they end up turning into the villain. They end up turning. They seem like the good guy in the beginning, but they end up turning into the villain because they hell bent on world destruction. They don't know how to check their ego at the door. And and in the Workplace Jazz book, I talk a lot about, in one of the chapters, being open to feedback, also surrendering to support. Yeah. And when you think about and why is that so important for musicians? Well, because as a musician, the way you learn is feedback. Yeah. You get an instrument, you go start taking lessons, the teacher gives you something to work on, or your coach gives you something to work on, you go work on it, you come back, you play it for them, and they go, no, don't do it that way, do it this way, hold the bow this way, do that. So they're constantly giving you feedback, you go work on it, and then pretty soon you're getting close to where things need to be. The audience gives you feedback. And so one of the things I discovered or just kind of wrote about was just how, the highest paid people in the world all love feedback. Yeah. They all have coaches. They're all work on personal development, right? Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And they deliberately practice, not just like, okay, I'm going to practice my stuff, but they deliberately, they time. Malcolm Gladwell stuff. Outliers. You don't have to be, great by a mile. Sometimes you just have to be great by a nose. Yeah. Think about win the Kentucky Derby, right? Yeah. I think the last horse was like, just kind of came out the back of the pack and like won. It was like, where did this thing come from? Yeah. But, exactly. But normally those things, those races are won by a nose. Yeah. Yeah. They're always close. And that's all you have to be, is just be better than the other group by a nose. Yeah. And it requires. Yeah. That's where practice comes in, and openness to coaching and development. Right. And if you're constantly defensive or the world's affecting me, not I'm affecting the world, mentality, then it gets very difficult to accomplish, exactly to practice and become masterful at what you're doing. Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. And then the other one that a lot of people will take a look at and have asked me about in the book is this idea of surrender to support. Yeah. And I always tell the story of a gentleman that I've gotten to know He's a really, really good jazz bassist. His name is David Dyson. And David Dyson went to Berklee College. I think he came out and was hired by the Backstreet Boys, became their music producer or director of the band. And then he started Pieces of a Dream, the jazz group, and a couple other Secret Societies, another band. But one of the things about David is that everyone who's at the top tier, Gerald Albright, Dave Koz, Peter White, these guys are always asking, is David Dyson available? Oh. And every time I turn around, he's on somebody's album, or he's doing it. He lays out his week and says, you know, I'm doing this show, that show, the other show. And all these guys are hiring him. Yeah. And after having some conversations with him, doing more research on him, and just learning about him, David has made his life's career of being someone who surrendered to support. In other words, when Pieces of His Dream was inducted into the Jazz Hall of Fame in Detroit, they're doing this performance and they're being inducted. The entire, at least the main song that they were doing was one that he wrote and produced, right? Okay. Everyone else is taking a solo. The guitar player's taking a solo, the keyboard player's taking a solo, the horn player's taking a solo. David is just sitting back playing bass. Yeah. So he's playing that supportive coach type role. You know, he's not in the forefront. You know, he's right. He's playing that quiet, supportive leader. Right. And he's making all of us look good by making all of them look good. Yeah. And you know, he has the chops to get out and, you know, play all the funky things and play all the solos and whatnot. But he chose for that event to play a song that actually didn't highlight him, just highlighted him as the leader who supports others. And you see that in entrepreneurship. I mean, a lot of small entrepreneurs are stuck being, you know, the mechanic, the manager, and the, you know, visionary, and they do all the jobs, right? And exactly, you know, remind me of the book, but it's that you know, famous book there. E-Myth. E-Myth, yeah, exactly. Thank you for coming up with that. And you know, that is the first fallacy, right? You know, is to you can't do it all. You can't do it all. And ultimately, if you're going to be a leader and a visionary, then you've got to be able to have the mechanics and the managers, and you got to let them be the best at their job, and you got to be supporting them in that journey, right? Exactly. And the way I look at it is that you have to know how to do it. You have to know what goes into making it happen, but doesn't mean that you have to be the person that does it. Yeah. And in fact, once you learn the basics of the accounting, and like when I started my consulting business, you know, I used to do all my books. Yeah. I was selling, client interfacing, you know, the whole 9 yards. But as I got better, I realized, you know what, I need to hire a bookkeeper. Yeah. But now I know what to look for. Yeah. You can when I get my reports, I know and you can lead and you can guide out. Yeah. I know exactly, okay, they're going to go and do the updates, but I know what I'm looking for when they're done to make sure that the books are done properly. I don't have to do them. Yeah. Trust and inspect. Exactly. Now I'm building some websites and I need developers. Yeah. Okay. Can I write code? Can I do HTML? Can I do some Java? Can I do SQL? Yeah. But I need an expert who can get in and do some things, but I also know what it requires. Yeah. So I know if I get a quote from someone and they're blowing smoke. Yeah. And I go, no, I don't know. We're not doing that. But I also know when I got someone who's really good and they know how to deliver. Yeah. And so it's, and again, that's where the conductor mindset comes in, where conductors actually, when they go to school, they actually have to learn how to play each one of those instruments to some extent. Yeah. Yeah. They have to have that familiarity. Exactly. Yeah. But they're not the expert. Yeah, yeah, they're the jack of all trades, and then they hire the all-stars in each role, right? Right, right, and what they become experts in is how to engage, how to deploy, how to set the intent, and then allow the artists to do their thing. Yeah. Well, this is a great analogy, and we're going to run out of time here. And obviously, we could talk about this all day long here. So before we wrap up, you know, I
I mean, I was totally curious, where you were going to go with this. And so I'm glad we were able to have a conversation. It's outside of my area. So I'm like the least musically inclined person you ever know. I always make the sports analogies. So you've brought
Right.
the artistic and musical analogies. So I really appreciate that, that perspective, and it's something new for me. And so this is really enjoyable. But where can we find you? And we'll obviously put links to all of your materials here in the page that this is posted on. But tell us a little bit
Right.
about where folks can find you.
You can find me on my website, geraldjleonard.com.
Okay.
And you all the different links and all the different things that I'm doing there. You can find links to my online store. You can find links to my music. I've done some
Nice.
I've done some bass songs that I wrote, or just some jazz songs that I wrote, working with a producer named Donald Robinson. But you can also, I'm very active on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And so if you just, again, search me on LinkedIn as Gerald J. Leonard, you'll find me there. I do Facebook and Twitter, but those are those two places are the main places you can go to find me, and everything else kind of is connected to those.
Great. And we can find your book, Workplace Jazz.
You can find it on Amazon or any bookstore. And my publisher was Business Expert Press, so it's in bookstores. It's also
Nice.
On Amazon and other online platforms.
Well, great. Well, Gerald, it was a great pleasure speaking with you today, and continue sharing your message. And I wish you the best of luck moving forward.
Fletcher, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And thanks for having me.